And welcome to this edition of the Deputy Podcast, the official podcast of the Oconee County Sheriff's Office SC. I'm your other host today. Jimmy is actually behind the scenes today, helping out running some of the equipment and making sure that everything's going good. So I'm sitting in today as your other host for the Deputy Podcast. This week we're kicking off Black History Month. And with us today, we have a very, very special guest with us. We have retired Lieutenant Chuck Hunter. Chuck, welcome so much to the Deputy Podcast.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Chuck, as a very, very dear friend, he has put in a lot of work in law enforcement. He's been with the Sheriff's Office 25 years, right?
Yes, sir.
25 years?
2025, yes.
Yeah, now was that all with us?
No, started out Clemson University.
Clemson University, and then you came to the Sheriff's Office.
That's correct.
And you've been retired now, how long?
2019.
2000. Has it been that long?
It has. It has.
Wow. And you retired as the lieutenant over the road patrol.
That's correct.
I remember you were my supervisor for a while, and I could not think of a better man to work with. I mean, you were a guiding light for me. It's an honor to call you a very, very dear friend as well.
Man, I'm very thankful and appreciate your friendship and the work you did for us.
Thank you. So one of the things we wanted to do here at the podcast when we kind of remade a lot of this is on the Deputy Podcast, we talk about anything and everything law enforcement, anything related to law enforcement, anything like that. So on this edition, we're kicking off Black History Month, but we wanted to take a little bit different route than what we have in the past. So we brought Chuck in as a retired officer from the Sheriff's Office to give us some insight from his perspective. Somebody who has worked with us and now he's back in the civilian world, I guess you could call it. Right. So we kind of wanted to have this little conversation with Chuck about Black History Month to kind of get us started. So Chuck, you tell our viewers and our listeners a little bit about you, where you're from, anything like that.
Yeah, I'm the youngest son of Bobby and Janet Hunter. I have an older brother, Richard Hunter. We lived in Seneca our entire lives. Went to Seneca High School, graduated in 1994. Once after graduation, I went to Clemson University and began working as a parking enforcement officer. Then graduated up to a police officer. Then came here. I'm married. I have 2 children and 2 wonderful grandchildren.
Awesome. So you started in parking enforcement.
That's right.
So you were the guy that was responsible for writing everybody parking tickets at the Clemson games.
Yes. No one liked that.
I guess that's not the ideal job.
No, it is
But
not.
It got you started.
It did. Yes, it did.
Good deal. So how long were you in parking enforcement?
3 years. I came straight out of high school, which ended up being a blessing because it allowed me to put into police retirement immediately. So I started at 18. As soon as I turned 21, that's when I became a patrol officer.
Awesome. And so then you went on the road at Clemson University.
I did.
So was that kind of like babysitting college kids?
I'm
just curious. No
when I was
there, but
when I was young and doing it, that's exactly what it felt like. You got the calls of drunk kids. You had to take them home instead of enforcing the law. Now that I'm older and you look back, well, we were serving the public. The public for us was the university kids. If they were good enough to call us to get a ride home, well, let's serve them. Let's get them home safe. Better that than them try to drive home or walk home and something terrible happens to them.
So what years were you working at Clemson and doing this?
Oh, my goodness.
Do you remember?
Straight out of high school, 1994, 3 years, 97. Stayed there another year and probably a half, so till 98, 99, something like that.
So from the very beginning, you were working to forge those relationships in your community at Clemson.
At Clemson, I was working for a job. I needed a paycheck and a job with benefits. Straight out of high school, I had my daughter, and I had to get a job. It just, there's a lot of things you can be, but a deadbeat is one that I will not ever be. So I had to get a job with benefits, and that's what it boiled down to, and it just matriculated. I guess God had me covered and led me down a path that still worked towards success.
So February, Black History Month. When we think about Black history, we tend to think about like the civil rights movement. We think about the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We think about Malcolm X. We even think way back into history, even way back into the slave trade. Right. We think about a lot of things like this. But, we think about these national things with Black History Month. But what about Oconee County? Can you talk a little bit about Black history here in Oconee County?
Oh yeah, you got right here in Oconee County. You have people like Helen Roseman Saunders. She won the, I believe it's called the Order of the Silver Crescent. That's the highest honor a civilian can get in the state.
That's awesome.
She did it for her service in education. You have people like Theodore Davis, who was the police chief of Seneca. You have George Cleveland Sr. He started out as patrol in Westminster, I believe the first black patrol. I think he matriculated up to the chief. So we just have a ton of history here, but even right here in the sheriff's office, you have history. You got Staff Sergeant Charles Mowey. He was the first SRO, period. The most the county ever had before that was a DARE officer. He was the first SRO. You have Sergeant Jordan Jameson. She was the first black female patrol officer here at Oconee County. And then she, of course, became the first black female SRO. And now she's the first black female investigator. So black history is all through this county and all through this department still.
That's awesome. You know, it's such a rich history.
Yes.
It's such a wonderful history, and it's so wonderful to talk about that with you because, you know, I didn't even think about Theodore Davis,
Right.
You know, being the first African-American chief of police for Seneca, right?
Yes, that's right.
Did not even think about that. That is so wonderful, so wonderful. So you talked a little bit earlier about your early years right out of high school and stuff like that. But thinking back to even earlier, your childhood, you know, adolescence, growing up, what was it like for you growing up in Oconee County as an African American?
Honestly, for me, it was very good. We have a huge family, and in our family, we were very close-knit. Uncles and aunts were just surrogate mothers and fathers. Our cousins were surrogate brothers and sisters. And we always stayed together. On weekends, we were together. We was always doing something together. So we were very isolated. And it had our own little bubble and village, I guess, to insulate us from anything. So we just really had a very good time. Growing up, my mother raised us to where we couldn't even describe another child using their race. We had to use something else. We couldn't say, hey, that white guy over there. She said, no.
Don't do that.
Describe him. So say, hey, the guy with this shirt on with that. Or Matthew, he plays basketball with me or whatever, that kind of stuff. So we weren't able to use race. And that was a beautiful upbringing. So it gave you a different view and a different way to look at things as a child. Now, of course, as you got older, some things happen. You like, that's different.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was the proper way, I think, to raise a child.
And what did your dad do? Like what
My dad, he worked at Torrington.
Okay.
Yes, so he matriculated up there to be a line supervisor. But he worked there. He was, I guess, educated in mechanics. And he was going to be able to become a mechanic, but my father is very religious. And once he got into it, he's like, man, you got to really rob people. Well, forgive me, mechanics. Overcharge people for something that you might not have to, right?
Right.
So he just said, no, that's not the way. So my father just a hard-working man.
That's awesome. And what'd your mom do?
My mother, she was an LPN.
She was an LPN?
Yes, sir.
At Oconee, that would have been Oconee General back then?
Yes, sir. But she spent the majority of her career at Mariner Healthcare.
Okay.
She matriculated over there to be the supervisor of something. She did the hiring stuff, so of the CNAs.
Okay. Very good. Very good. So thinking back, when you talked about your family and everything, but you know, here on the Deputy Podcast, we like to you know, tie it into law enforcement a little bit. So thinking about growing up, what was law enforcement like back then when you were a child, or what did you see? What did you hear?
Well, as a child, again, I had law enforcement in my family. My uncle was a officer in Westminster. Of course, my Uncle Corey, he was the first black police officer at Clemson Police Department. So we had law enforcement in the family, so we had a positive view of law enforcement. As we got older, I guess the only negative, or the first time I saw a negative, personally, was when I was in high school. I think I was senior, I believe. I driving too fast, took a curve, wrecked the car, flipped it over in an embankment.
Oh, no.
That's just stupid. Chasing after some girl, I'm sure. But anyway.
Good times, right?
Yeah, well, I thought it was until I wrecked that car and had to tell my parents.
Like a good idea at the time. You know?
Till my parents got that call. It was a great time. And the police officer for Seneca came, and he just wasn't in the best of moods, I guess. I don't know. And he said some things I didn't like, so I chirped back instead of just keeping calm. And then he said, go down there, crawl down that hill to that car, and if you can read, bring the registration up.
What?
Now, yes. miraculously, or just, I guess, ironically, later on, once I became an officer, he was still at Seneca. And he actually needed my help for something. But I didn't hold it against him. Just moved on. So it worked out. But that was the only negative I could say I really had with law enforcement as a youth.
Now, from your family that was in law enforcement, do you ever recall hearing any stories about their experiences, or did they ever?
Of course, but back then, of course, law enforcement was a little bit different. And just like when we first got into it, it was all about the excitement of it and that kind of stuff. So those are the stories you heard. You didn't hear about the grind and that kind of thing, just the police chases and that kind of stuff, just cops and robbers stuff.
Oh, the fun stuff.
Yeah, the fun stuff.
The fun stuff.
That's right.
You said something just a second ago. You said, obviously, law enforcement was different back then. I kind of want to talk about that for just a second. How has our community changed? And the community, law enforcement in Oconee, over the years as a whole, with regard to how African Americans are treated then versus now. What have you seen?
Well, racism has become more covert. It's out in the open now. In recent times, it's coming back out in the open, I guess. As far as law enforcement, though, I've seen law enforcement agencies, especially after the George Floyd situation, really strive to try to change. I know Seneca City with Chief Bowling, he made it a point. Actually, he brought me in after retirement. And one of the things was say, hey, see what we can do with the community, see where we stand. So I talked to a lot of people in the community, a lot of activists in the community, and remarkably, they already stood well. And one of the things they were doing was they would give like out popsicles in the low impoverished places just to let them know, hey, we're here. You need us, come call, give us. Here at the Sheriff's Office, I think we made good strides. Instead of looking at me as a black person, look at me as a person. Look at the thing I did, not the color, and think that, hey, he's evil somehow. But so I think law enforcement has probably made much better strides. I think, again, the George Floyd thing had a lot to do with it. And believe it or not, I think the Kaepernick taking a knee had something to do with it. Everybody was in an uproar about him taking a knee during the anthem and saying, oh, you're wrong, you're this, you're that. But from that, what you saw was the public now videoing with cameras, pulling out their phones, getting everything police are doing. And you found out that some of it wasn't just white on black. It was all across the spectrum. Police in general, in certain areas, were just taking it too far, being too aggressive. And from that, you end up getting now we have to wear body cameras. You have to turn them on. So I think it gives a level of accountability and a level of transparency that has come with it. There's still some ugly things out there, but we have to understand that we're all people. At the end of the day, we're human. A lot of times, for the officer side, some of them are just entirely overworked. I know we overworked you guys. I know there was times I said, listen, I know I'm calling you too much, Alan, but I know you guys who can get it done, so I'm trying to, so I understand. But we as officers, I say we, I'm retired, but like the sheriff said, we're supposed to be in the vein of a knight. I mean, supposed to be Sir Arthur Peel, he said, was the father of this stuff. So if we're going to be like knights, then we need to act like knights. We need to move honorably in everything that we do. Take patience. Understand that people don't call you when the day's good. Nobody's ever called me in law enforcement and say, hey, I'm having a wonderful day.
That's right.
They always call us when the situation has gotten too big for them to handle. It's the worst day of their lives and they need help. So understand they're not going to be in the best mood. And I think when we get that patience and whatnot and begin to empathize with people and understand, listen, life happens to all of us. If it hasn't happened to you yet, keep living. It will. So when you're able to get that, we can have better service and we're just better as a whole. And I think we're making strides towards that.
When you were at the university, now you said earlier that you took the parking enforcement job to get a job.
Yes, I needed a job.
You needed a job, you needed benefits. What kind of led you into the transition? Why law enforcement?
It was simply, again, I needed a job. I was there for 3 years. An opening came available. It was a pay raise. I just moving forward in my career. Said, all right, this is what I'm doing. Let's move forward, make more money. I applied for it. And at the time, there was this officer that was going to hire from another agency, but he had some baggage that the captain did not like. It was ugly baggage. And Captain Thea McCrary, she's deceased now, she called me an officer and asked, hey, you want to be officer? And I said, well, yes, ma'am. She said, why? I said, to be honest, listen, I just trying to move forward in my career, make more money, take care of my child. And she says, all right, you've shown that you're good enough. I'll give you a chance. And she did. And once I went to the academy and passed, I said, well, listen, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to make sure that people are treated right. people who look like me have a voice. They're treated with respect. And just try to treat everybody, regardless of your station in life, with respect. That's all it takes. It doesn't take me anything to treat you the way I want to be treated.
That's right. That is something that's truly free. That doesn't cost us a dime.
Nothing.
And from that, so you started out as just a job.
Just a job.
Just a job. I just need to put food on the table.
That's it.
You came to the sheriff's office
Yes.
as a road deputy. You then went on to the warrant unit.
I did.
Then you became lieutenant
Yes.
over the road. The man, the guy, right, over the road patrol.
Okay.
Over, back then, let's see, it would have been 32
Yes.
deputies, I think it was. Now it's over 40.
Yes.
And now you're retired.
Yes.
What a success story from a humble man.
Listen, everything works out for good for those who love the Lord.
That's true.
So it worked out for me.
Very blessed. Very
Absolutely.
blessed. When you first made lieutenant, now was that your first kind of supervisory position? Or
I was corporal on warrants for a while, but I mean, there's only 4 of us, so really who you supervising, right?
Right.
It just means you had to do some paperwork, what it boiled down to. But
you had
that
to
was
do
it.
all the stuff that the sergeant did not want to do,
There
right?
you go. That's it. That is it.
Delegation.
That is it. Now, a good thing, the sergeant was a good friend of mine, Jim Stokes, so he didn't pass down too much. It worked out well.
Great team.
Yes.
Epic team, from what I recall. It.
Yes,
Epic team.
yes.
And then in 2014, you became lieutenant over the road, but you also SWAT commander.
Yes.
Or
yes,
assistant SWAT
yes,
commander.
Yes.
So now not only did you have 32 road guys to look after, you also had a specialized tactical unit.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
How did all of that make you feel?
I was very proud of SWAT, to be honest. That was just my bread and butter. I loved that. The fact that Captain Ken watched thought enough of me and saw the development through the years of being on SWAT, and gave me opportunity to have a leadership role, that was beautiful. With the road, Alan, you're just so busy. You just never thought, hey, this is a great accomplishment. You never had time to think about that. I remember one time Jim came to the office that seemed for him was trying to go to lunch. I had my cell phone to one ear, the office phone to the other ear, and I was trying to reply to email all at the same time. He took a picture of this and sent it to me. And I was like, look, man, I can't make it. So you just stayed so busy, Lieutenant, you never had the opportunity to truly enjoy it. It just was what it was.
Always on the go.
Always.
Always on the go. Thinking about your success, what do you think contributed to that success? Why do you think Sheriff Crenshaw, being newly elected, chose you, Chuck Hunter?
I'm hoping that he saw something in my character. To be honest, myself and the sheriff never really spoke. While he was here as a leader of investigations, captain of investigations. Only one time he had a complaint on one of our warrant officers, and he called me. And he told me hey, what the complaint was, and I said, listen, I don't know anything about it. If you would, just give me a minute, let me track it down. And what impressed me and I enjoyed about him was he said, all right, I'm not going to say anything till you get back to me. Now, in the past, we've had certain supervisors, you were guilty. That officer was guilty, whatever, until proven innocent. But he just let it rock until you tell him what's going on. And when he found out the deputy did nothing wrong, followed the law perfectly, and explained it to him, it worked out great. So that was really our first true interaction, but it was a positive one. And I appreciated him giving us opportunity to at least explain ourselves before accusing us of something.
And then, that was in 2014.
Yes, sir.
You retired in 2019.
Yes.
The capstone of a career.
Yes.
Serving your community. There's an idea out there. Know the past, shape the future. It takes the idea of learning our history as a community, as a nation, as a culture of one, basically human being, race. What is the most important thing, in your opinion, for us as a community as the whole, to know from the past, from our history, and then how do we use that to shape our future from here?
I don't know if it is just one thing, to be honest. I mean, we as a community, as a country, have a very colorful, sometimes dark past. If we don't face it, we can't change it. I remember James Baldwin, he's a author, or was an author, a poet, and an activist. And one of his famous quotes is, "Not everything faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." So you have to go through the history. I know it's been put out there, certain political aspects say, hey, don't teach certain histories because it's going to hurt people's feelings. No, if you don't know your history, there's no way you can change it. You can't address it. If I wrong you, well, until I face it, hey, we can't get back right. If I look back and put it into with law enforcement, when I had a complaint on a deputy, well, all right, I went, looked, see what it was. If he was guilty of that complaint, then you did the corrective punishment, but you didn't just punish. You talked to him and found out what the reason was.
The learning
what was
experience.
the problem, right? And you address the core of the problem. Because if you don't fix that, it's going to keep happening. So you have to face it. I just think we have to face our history. In 1930, I was reading some things. That was the last lynching that happened in Oconee County.
1930,
from my understanding now, from what I read.
Right.
I'll share you the information. You can backtrack it and change it on here if you need to. But I believe the person's name was Alan Green, I believe. He was accused of assaulting a white woman. The sheriff, last name was Thomas, I believe. But anyway, of course, he brought him in. The accusing party, she ended up denying, said, listen, it didn't happen. I just saying something. Well, the husband didn't like it. So the husband said no, and he ended up getting a mob of over 100 people, not just in the Walhalla, but the surrounding area.
Really?
Yeah, and Seneca and Westminster as well. And they came up, overpowered the sheriff, who tried to do his job. So I will give him huge kudos for that. Took him out, put him up against a tree, and shot him dead. And at the end of that, they ended up pulling out bark to take back his souvenirs. This is souvenirs of killing an innocent man, of murder. These kind of things have to be faced. How cool would it be if those people, like we do Peel Buyback Day, what they did evil Buyback Day?
Now that would be cool.
Some of those souvenirs are still out there, still probably put up in homes, thought of as a memento of a great event. But it wasn't. You murdered an innocent man. This man he worked at the telephone company, and he was a volunteer firefighter, accredited for saving some lives. What if they brought those things back? And then we just burned them. We addressed it. We burned it. It's over. Let's forgive. Let's repair. Let's move on.
Yes.
That'd be a great healing thing for this community. It'll be a first step of actually facing some of our ugly and ill past and just healing and going on. Until you face it, you cannot change it. It's just what it is.
That's an amazing story. Absolutely amazing story. And I think there's so much truth to it that if we don't teach our history,
right,
then we run the risk of making the same mistake again, I guess.
We will.
And even though it's painful to hear, and it hurts, it hurts us as a community. We've got to know where we were.
You have to.
So that we don't go back.
Have to, but the hurt's only temporary.
It is.
It's just like ripping that Band-Aid off. Get it off. All right, let's move on.
Most definitely. As we kind of wrap things up, and I like to ask a lot of the people that I've interviewed this question because to me, everybody's got something different to contribute.
Right.
So for all our listeners and viewers out there, from you, Chuck Hunter, successful man, good man,
all right,
dear friend, what is the best piece of advice that you have been given in your life, and how has it shaped you today?
Probably the best piece of advice probably came from my pastor. She shared a story. I don't know where she got it from. But it was a story of a mother trying to teach her daughter about how to be a Christian and move in this world. And what happened is the mother took 3 pots, filled them with water, put them on the stove, brought them to a boil. In front of one pot, she put eggs. In front of the other, she put fresh green beans. And the last, she put coffee beans. She brought her daughter in and said, hey, what do you see? Of course, the daughter just says eggs, green beans, coffee beans, right? So the mother then put the items in the boiling water, let them sit for a time, then took them out. And asked the daughter again, hey, what do you see? She says eggs, green beans, coffee beans. The mother said, that's not what I'm trying to teach you. Said that water's life. That's the ups and downs, trials, tribulations, all the hard things, everything's gonna come against you. Said the eggs represent that person who was just innocent, fragile, looked at the world with bright eyes, but then they get in the world and it came out hard. It's brittle, stiff. The green beans was that person that was strong. They were colorful. They were full of life. They get in the water, and now life has just beat them down. The color's gone. It's blanched. They're weak. They're limp. Said, but the coffee beans went in as coffee beans, came out as coffee beans. It changed the water. It changed the people around it. Said, that's what you have to be. The person that changed the ones around you. Don't allow them to change you. If we do that as law enforcement, as people, since we're supposed to be the people of high morale, high honor, if we can do that, we can change these communities, our communities, and man, everything works out. So be the coffee beans. That's the best advice I've probably heard.
And that's true not only for us as law enforcement, but anybody.
Anybody.
Words of wisdom from
Yes,
a
sir.
wise man.
Well, passed down from my pastor, from wherever she got it from.
Okay, fair enough. Chuck, thank you so much for joining us today on the
Yes,
Deputy
sir.
Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, Chuck Hunter, retired lieutenant from Oconee County Sheriff's Office. We want to thank you for joining us on this edition of the Deputy Podcast. And as a reminder, you can follow us on YouTube, where you can see a video version of this. We're also on all the major streaming platforms, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and so many more, Spotify. So make sure to click like and subscribe. If you're following us on YouTube, click the bell notification so you can be notified of new content as we post it, and you can stay up to date with everything that's going on with the Deputy Podcast and stuff at the Oconee County Sheriff's Office as well. For those of you listening on our podcast audio only version, make sure to follow us so that you can stay notified of our new content and so you can be notified of new episodes and stay up to date as well. For Oconee County Sheriff's Office, I'm Sergeant Alan Sayre. This has been the Deputy Podcast, the official podcast of the Oconee County Sheriff's Office, SC.